Good morning to you. This is Talk Breakfast with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 9:25 is the time. Let's talk to international affairs campaigner Mark Sabah, who joins me in the studio right now. Good morning to you.
Morning,
now, you're here to talk about what has been going on in Russia. We saw yesterday that opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza been sentenced to 25 years in jail on treason charges, basically for being an opposition campaigher. Yeah. That's not allowed under Putin. We also, of course, got the Wall Street Journal American journalist detained in Russia on spying charges. He has been visited by the US ambassador to Russia, who reported that he was in good health, but big concerns to him. And this is, of course, the first time US officials have been granted access to him. You've spent many, many years working on representing Brits and others held abroad or facing charges abroad. You worked with Bill Browder, a fantastic campaigner on just horrific, basically the murderous activities of Vladimir Putin. Can we start with the opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza? A lot of us in this country won't really have heard of him. How significant was it? His role as an activist, but also that 25-year jail sentence?
So first of all, Vladimir Kara-Murza is a British citizen who worked in Russian opposition politics for many years. He worked for the former Russian Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov.
Why was he a British citizen?
He was a British citizen through, he came to university here, he gained his citizenship that way, and he lived here for many years, and he was campaigning against Putin for many years. His former boss, Boris Nemtsov, was gunned down outside the Kremlin in 2015, on that day when mysteriously all cameras were switched off for maintenance.
Incredible coincidence.
Incredible coincidence. And after Boris Nemtsov was killed, Vladimir Kara-Murza very much became a partner to the Magnitsky campaign, which I worked on with Bill Browder, and he travelled around the world with us. He was with us in Oslo, Canada, DC, and several other countries, campaigning from the Russian perspective about why targeted sanctions are the best way to punish corrupt government officials who abuse human rights for profit. And ultimately, he's been sentenced to jail for 25 years for treason for two things. Number one, for supporting the Magnitsky campaign, but also for vocally opposing the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's so difficult in our country to get your head around, that this sort of level of opposition can be punishable by basically the rest of your life spent in jails. He's going to be sent to a very strict penal colony. These are very different from the jails we would expect in this country. He's denied all of the charges. These tend to be sham trials, don't they? There was big concern, but Western journalists are unable to gain access to the court. He's not the first. He's not the last opposition campaigner. This has been a pretty successful policy by Vladimir Putin, that any opposition activist who becomes vaguely high profile, they end up either dead or behind bars. Yeah,
it's a complete mystery how many dead opposition activists they are. It's obviously a health risk, but it's not just that. China uses the same systems.
Yep.
China and Hong Kong are holding a British citizen, Jimmy Lai, on spurious charges again, saying that he was threatening the country and so on by running a pro-democracy newspaper. So there you have dictators around the world increasingly turning their fire on journalists who dare to stand up and accuse them.
And that's crucial. I think we've got this US journalist, haven't we, Evan Gershkovich. He's been detained on spying charges. Thank goodness he is in good health. He was arrested on the 29th of March. But he was working for the Wall Street Journal. Now, that's a sister newspaper, the organisation that I'm employed by. He's been charged with spying. I say he denies any wrongdoing. What is Russia? What is Russia concerned what are they claiming to be concerned about what he did?
Well, usually foreign journalists almost got a pass in countries like Russia because the assumption is local people aren't reading their newspapers. Yeah. And therefore they sort of were allowed in this weird bubble where they could report freely in a way that Russian journalists could not get away with it. The problem is if they start picking on subjects which are a little bit too sensitive. Evan got very close to uncovering collaboration with the Wagner Group, mercenaries in Ukraine and other parts of the world.
Which is always being denied officially.
Which is always being denied. And he's
mainly because of the atrocities the Wagner Group
correct, exactly right. And he probably got a little bit too close and they said, hang on, that's too much, we've got to put him away. It's also a warning to other foreign journalists, including BBC, Sky News, any other foreign journalists.
And it does have an impact. It makes people very wary because of their own. And again, it's not just, I'll be expelled from the country. I could spend the rest of my, my healthy life behind bars. and not see my family again. He could face up to 20 years in prison if he's found guilty of spying. Now, they claim he was trying to obtain classified defence information for the US government. Yeah. He was trying to obtain defence information as a journalist. It's our job to do that.
Exactly.
Crucial thing here is, as you mentioned, Western journalists largely been given a relative free pass. This is the first time that Moscow has accused a US journalist of espionage since the Soviet era.
Yeah, since I think 1986. But it also shows increasingly that even President Putin, who has played the world so well, even now he has to start cracking down on foreign journalists as a sign to others, as a warning to foreign governments, and possibly as part of hostage diplomacy. We saw recently the American basketballer Brittany Griner, who was arrested and detained, and eventually she was swapped for Victor Bout, who was the world's biggest arms dealer. Yeah. I mean, it's hardly a fair trade, but there it is. Yeah. So
you think that's what this is going to be about?
I think possibly.
And we get used to Iran doing this, we know, but that's the thing. This is now the normal world of affairs. Is Russia a safe place for journalists to work?
It's not a safe place for journalists, but it's not a safe place for Western business people either. It's not a safe place for anyone. If you go there, you should go fully aware that you may get arrested, you may be detained indefinitely, often on spurious charges, and the government may not be able to help you. They can.
There is that, and I think Americans and Brits are some of the worst in terms of thinking this. That you sort of, something goes wrong on a holiday, wherever you are, on holiday or business trip abroad, wave your British or American passport, all sorted. That is not the case.
It's absolutely not true. The idea of a white shining a knight on a shining horse who gallops in to rescue you is a dream. It doesn't happen. And any British business person who's going into Russia, going into China, has to go with a full knowledge and understanding that you are on your own. Yeah. And if things go wrong, there is nobody there to help you other than putting out strongly worded statements, potentially, possibly seeing you in detention. And even then, that can be denied.
And the trouble with this does have the cold hand of self-censorship, that journalists veer away from this. It does exactly the job that Vladimir Putin intends. I mean, these incredibly brave people, Evan Gershkovich and others, are people trying to fight for freedom. Freedom of information is so crucial in terms of some democratic accountability for people like Vladimir Putin. Well, we should hope that he is kept safe. We hope that he will be freed eventually. But Mark Sabah, I really appreciate you joining us. He's an international affairs campaigner. 9:32 is the time. Up next, we are going to get an update